Hello, scribes. I believe we are live. It is on. Welcome. Salutations. Just sort my levels out. Put you on mute. 13th of March 2019. Hello, good day, greetings. John, yo. I've covered up me. I need to put you here. Let's get you set up. We're going to go straight in with it. I'm not going to wait as it's a school day. What I'm going to read is a publication that has come from my mother in 1995. I'm currently doing some research regarding personal medical negligence injury claims. And so we have a publication, maybe not so good. The prudent patient versus the Bolam test, B-O-L-A-M, see the description for the spelling, 1995, written by my mum, Julia, LL.B.Ons, and it was a dissertation for Sheffield Hallam University. So let me get my other handset so I can keep an eye on things, audio and the like, and then we'll get on with reading some of this publication. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to cover certain bits and give you some of the research material, references, and applicable areas. So, yeah, you will see in the links there, I have posted a link for the Civil Court Practice 2019, the Green Book. That is what governs the law, basically. There is a white book. Solicitors use that. There is a green book. Barristers use that. Different types of jurisdiction, jurisprudence, civil, criminal. So let me get to the feed. Sorry, I haven't set this up. Also, there are some claims being bandied around that we copy, that we imitate, that we are not original, as we say, and we are imitating. Well, we don't imitate. No, we don't copy. Let me just text the Queen. It's amazing, the timing. Yeah, so there are claims banding around that not original. I got into law accidentally. I wasn't supposed to be in law. We're all in law because we deal with law every day of our lives, unbeknown to us. So with that said, my vocational pathway was not directed into law, much like my mum's, Julia. She wasn't directed into law through academic research, the want of getting that status and so forth and so on. Good sound. And she got into it due to miscarriages of justice. The police were being called to domestic assault situations in the late 80s. And when they were turning up, they were leaving again. And there was a woman, several young assets, daughters and sons in the property, social housing. And my mum took it upon herself to try to pioneer some areas of the common law injustices towards women. As we've pointed out, this area is predominantly male, stale, pale, and quite racial to some extent, as we can prove and articulate. And let we forget the anti-Semitism and everything that's banding around at the minute, but racial prejudice, social prejudice. Lots of prejudices around and about in these institutions and private corporations. They're not publicly bandied around, but we can see through prominent historical progress, actions, how they award, promotions within the ranks, rank and file officers, to be precise. The Met, I'm sorry you get called into this because you're in the public realm there. providing a service as the authority working from the author's, words. So my mum decided to look at this, look at common law, domestic basically, and a domestic disturbance and what that was comprised of. So there's a little bit of background. It was because she was in need of support and help, felt victimized by a system and challenged the system. Incidentally went on to do law, vocation, education, we'll call it, indoctrination through the universities, and subsequently ended up through a progression there. Sheffield Hallam University. This is a conferment of honorary fellowships and degrees of the graduation of students from Sheffield City Hallam. So that's like a publication that the students get when they graduate from their degrees and so forth. My mum's name's in there. And then within this publication for the dissertation, it contains some relevant information for us all. So I'm going to skip out certain parts, but I'll show you the front cover, which has got the prudent patient. I will scan this and put this onto the .com for study and research purposes. I have my mum's permission to go through this. It's been and done. It's been submitted to the universities. The prudent patient versus the Bolam test, 1995, by Julia of the Giaramita estate, clan, tribe, and a dissertation submitted in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the honours degree of Bachelor of Laws, known as LL.B, at Sheffield Hallam University. So I'll skip acknowledgements, declarations, summary. We'll go to chapter 1, introduction, all right, because there's a bit of personal information in here that I'm not going to share, family stuff. Declaration from my mother. She hereby declares that the material contained in this dissertation has not been used in any other submission for an academic award. The prudent patient versus the Bolam test, and this was written in 1995, but it's not referencing the year 1995. You'll get your citations and references duly as I read it out. So a summary. This dissertation is concerned with medical negligence cases arising from a breach of the doctor's duty to disclose material information to his patient. You will notice that the man is referenced in this and in law and in publications. I will change it to they, she, it is hard for me to do that. So just know that the law is written by men for men. And the word man is going to include everybody. It's not my choosing, but a particular emphasis has focused on the most appropriate course of action and the legal rules applying thereto. The underlying theme is concerned with the standard of medical practice as espoused in the case of Bolam versus Fryan Hospital Management Committee 1957 1 WLR 582. It is suggested that the Bolam test is an inappropriate determination of the duty to disclose and should be replaced with the reasonable patient test. This is justified by acknowledging the patient's right to self-determination, to be fully informed of relevant information, and to take an active role in the decision-making process. Now, that's what we do at splspro.com. We are obliged in our covenant with the Creator, Lord God, to be fully, you are duty bound to be fully informed of all relevant information and to take an active role in the decision-making process. Key competence, we call that. A comparative study is taken by corresponding American doctrine of informed consent. Lord Scarman in Sidaway versus Board of Governors of Bethlehem Royal Hospital and the Maudsley Hospital, 1985, Alpha Charlie 817, recommends the English courts adopt a similar view. An analogy of the doctrine in Canada and Australia is also made. So it's relevant to all the countries, most of the big Western countries. It is recommended that the English law should depart from the professional orientated standard of disclosure and adopt a similar position to that of in Australia. The case of Rogers versus Whitaker, 1993, 4 MED LR 79, provides an ideal illustration and one it is respectively suggested that the English court should follow. Chapter 1, Introduction. The purpose of this dissertation is to analyse the situation where patients have suffered harm as a result of medical treatment, in particular where the harm is caused by the materialisation of attendant risks not disclosed to the patient. The main concern of the work is to focus on the position of the patient who claims he should have been told the risks involved, or he should have been told, so they should have been told of the risks involved, and of any alternative of options available to them. The scope of this work will confine itself to the situation where the patient receives hospital treatment under the NHS service, and therefore contract law will not enter the discussion. The patient's action will lie in the law of tort, a civil wrong aimed at providing a remedy for those who have been harmed by the conduct of others. Chapter 2 will discuss whether the patient's action should lie in trespass or negligence. The tort of trespass to the person is defined in battery as an intentional infliction of unlawful force upon another. The harm caused here is the unlawful touching. Therefore, it is unnecessary to show an intention to cause personal injury. In other words, if the patient does not consent to the proposed treatment that is subsequently given, the harm caused is the treatment itself, despite any beneficial consequences derived from it. So that's pretty unilateral to an explanation there, about the law of tort, remedy, harmed, and trespass and negligence. The tort of trespass to the person is defined in battery. Physical harm has happened to the woman, yeah? The tort of battery is reliant upon the issue of consent, which in medical situations is given a broad definition. For example, yeah, it is consent knowingly, unknowingly consenting. It's given a broad definition for many reasons. For example, when a patient gives his consent or their consent to any treatment, the consent must be real, i.e., it must be given voluntarily by a patient who has the capacity to consent to the treatment based on a sufficient level of information. The capacity of the plaintiff, plaintiff, a plaintiff. Yes, you're having a tiff, a lover's tiff, a plaintiff. It will be deemed to be that of a competent adult. Remember where adult comes from, adulterer. Minors and mentally incapacitated plaintiffs are worthy of much more detailed discussion than is possible in this current context within my hands here. If a doctor fails to obtain the patient's consent to the procedure in question, he will be liable in battery. Battery, not as in battery is what goes in your products. It's spelt the same as a battery, as in the power cell batteries, but it's a Sultan battery when it's on about battery here, For consent to be violated, the nature of the operation must be entirely different to that given consent. Consequently, performing the wrong operation or conducting it on the wrong patient amounts to a battery. Where the patient is informed in broad terms of the nature of the intended procedure and gives their consent, the consent is real, and the cause of the action on which to base a claim for failure to go into risks and implications is negligence and not trespass. The court's attitude in disallowing actions in battery for non-disclosure of risks is due to their reluctance in medical cases to impose strict penalties that may lead to criminal proceedings. So there you're going from civil to criminal, and the reluctance in their, ability to impose penalties. Therefore, the action will lie in the tort of negligence, which consists of a legal duty to take reasonable care, and breach of that duty causes damage to the plaintiff. The plaintiff must establish a duty of care was owned by the defendant, as defined by Lord Atkin's neighbour principle. So if you all search Lord Atkins and the neighbour principle, yeah, let me just answer our Queen while then some of you do that. Let's get a jumper on because I haven't got the heating on. Bear with me. Just take a pause. Take a minute. Just sit right there. Let me get something fleecy. Noticed it's dropped again. I was out in the shorts the other day, last week. This week, it's mostly been cold. So, have you searched for the neighbourhood principle? Discovery, wonderful thing. Lord Atkin's neighbour principle. Love thy neighbour. Remember that one as well. You must take reasonable care to avoid acts or omissions which you can reasonably foresee would be likely to injure your neighbour. Who then is my neighbour? The answer seems to be men. It says persons here, but we'll say men who are closely and directly affected by your act that I ought to reasonably to have them in contemplation as being so affected when I am directing my mind to the acts or omissions which are called in question. So, to summarise that one, my rights end where yours begin. A duty of care is easily established in the doctor-patient relationship. It is in proving the breach of the duty of care and the subsequent causation issue which provides the plaintiff with an erroneous task. Proof of breach depends on whether the defendant's performance was of the required standard. Whether this standard is met or otherwise will be the evidence of either competence or negligence. Let's just take a minute, see who's in the house. John, lots from John. Thank you, John. I'll look at that in a minute. 6 viewing, thank you very much. The standard of care in medical cases was expounded in the leading case of Bolam versus Friern, F-R-I-E-R-N, Hospital Management Committee, 1957. 1 WLR 582. An in-depth discussion will be given in Chapter 3. The case was concerned inter alia with risk disclosure. The ratio of the case is commonly referred to as the Bolam test. A doctor is not negligent if he has acted in accordance with a practice accepted as proper by a reasonable body of medical men skilled in that particular art. That makes sense. This statement holds true today, and an analysis of the attitude of the courts when considering expert medical opinion regarding the accepted medical practice is an integral theme of this work. The case of Sidaway versus Board of Governors of Bethlehem Royal Hospital and the Maudsley Hospital and others, 1985, illustrates the application of the Bolam test and will be discussed in detail in chapters 3 and 4. The case depicts the nexus of problems facing plaintiffs when harm is caused by the manifestation of an inherent risk in the procedure. The plaintiff's claim was based on a negligent failure of the surgeon to warn them of the risk of injury and thus was a breach of the standard of care. The case held inter alia, search INTER space ALIA. The surgeon was not in breach of a duty by applying the Bolam test. The above case raises the important issues of medical paternalism and the concept of informed consent. Chapter 5 gives a brief history of the origin of the doctrine established in the American case of Salgo, S-A-L-G-O, versus Leyland, L-E-L-A-N-D, Stanford, Junior University Board of Trustees, 1957. Salgo versus Leyland, Stanford, Junior University Board of Trustees. Now that sounds like a court case. Wow. This landmark decision sought to advance the contemporary requirements necessary for a valid consent. The procedural advantages gained by the doctrine would greatly assist the plaintiff where the where the failure to obtain an informed consent led to an action in battery. The main advantage over an action in negligence is that it is far easier for the plaintiff to establish causation. So that doctrine is mentioned there. Doctrine, another doctrine, okay? Medical doctrines. The court in England applied a professional standard of disclosure. Did it now? Following the Bolam test and the majority decision in Sidaway. If the plaintiff succeeds in proving this standard was breached, they face the additional problem of proving causation. Chapter 5 will discuss this problem in detail. A comparative study will be made of the standard disclosure and the approach to causation adopted by countries in the Commonwealth. The use of the prudent patient test is to identify the material risk to be disclosed has not been adopted in this country for reasons of policy. Important note. In particular, the courts do not want to emulate the situation in America with regard to its high litigation level. Wow, newsflash. This policy will be challenged in Chapter 6 with reference to the recent Australian case of Rogers versus Whitaker, 1993. 4 Med LR 79. This case dispensed with the Bolam test as the standard for disclosure and replaced it with a reasonable patient test. The Australian court did not introduce the concept of informed consent into the law, but extended the law of negligence to include the duty to disclose material risk based on the prudent patient approach. And the final chapter will conclude with the recommendation that English courts should follow the Australian example, dispense with the Bolam test and adopt a reasonable patient test for the standard of disclosure. Wow. Okay. I hope you realise the gravitas of that sentence. This being primarily an objective test originating from the decisions in Canterbury versus Spence, 1972, and Reibel, R-E-I-B-L, Reibel versus Hughes, 1980. The harsh effects of the objective standard are cushioned by the subjective element contained in the consideration of the particular patient's circumstances. Causation should continue to be approached subjectively, as dictated by the general law of negligence. Any likelihood of self-serving testimony should be balanced by an objective consideration in cases where there are no extraneous circumstances and the treatment is urgent. The concept of informed consent should not be adopted per se, but as in Australia, it should be incorporated into the law of negligence as the duty to disclose material risks. And then we're going on to chapter 2, and I'll finish here and we'll continue on another day. The chapter 2 is called Trespass or Negligence, titled Battery. The legal requirement of consent is verification to the right to patient autonomy, and any reference to which compels the recital of the classic statement of Cardozo, J, C-A-R-D-O-Z-O, and then J. Every human being of adult years and sound mind has a right to determine what shall be done with his own body, and a surgeon who performs an operation without the patient's consent commits an assault. Consent also gives lawful justification for the medical treatment that would otherwise amount to the tort of battery in trespass. The consent must be valid, i.e., it must be given voluntarily by a patient with the mental capacity to understand the nature of the procedure, and they must be given adequate information on which to base the decisions. Battery is the infliction of unlawful force upon another person. That's not just in medical negligence, that's a statement in itself. Battery is the infliction of unlawful force on another person, man, being, soul, sentient. The act must be intentional, but it does not require any element of hostility. Battery is actionable per se. The injury suffered here is the invasion of the person's bodily integrity. There is no need to prove the cause of the damage unless more than mere nominal damages are required, in which case the plaintiff must prove that the damage was a direct result of the unlawful force. In medical cases, this is usually a simple matter of fact. The scope of battery is confined to situations where there is a complete lack of consent or where it has been exceeded. In White versus Turner, 1981, Lyndon J. said the following: without a consent, either written or oral, no surgery may be performed. This is not a mere formality. It is an important individual right to have the control over one's body. Even where medical treatment is involved, it is the patient, not the doctor, who decides whether surgery will be performed, where it will be done, when it will be done, and by whom it will be done. In English law, the scope of battery does not extend to the situation where the patient complains of lack of information or advice. In Chatterton versus Gerson, 1981, Bristow J. held, once the patient is informed in broad terms of the nature of the procedure intended and gives their consent, that consent is real, and the cause of action on which to base a claim for failure to go into risks and implications is negligence and not trespass. It would be very much against the interests of justice if actions which are really based on failure by the doctor to perform his duty adequately to inform were pleaded in trespass. Negligence. What then is the distinction between medical trespass and medical negligence? Courts in America have accepted the view that failure to inform the patient of the risks inherent in proposed treatment relates to the tort of negligence and not to the tort of trespass. The distinction is useful for the purpose of classification and application of tortuous liability, and is tortuous, tortus, like not the, yeah, wow, and is also necessary for establishing the different functions of the two torts. The hare and the tortoise, eh? I am the hare, they are the tort, us. The chapter will discuss the possibility that the distinction is inappropriate, first by examining the distinction drawn by the cases and then suggesting a more appropriate relationship between medical trespass and negligence. In Wells versus Surrey Area Health Authority, 1978, the court held that the defendant had been negligent in failing to give the plaintiff proper advice before performing the operation. The plaintiff was in labour when the question of sterilisation had first been suggested and the operation was performed during the caesarean section. Croom-Johnson J. held that the plaintiff had understood the full implications of the operation to which she was consenting and therefore the consent was real. It is difficult to reconcile the judgment with the court's finding that the doctor had failed to give his patient proper advice about the implications of the operation. The court was struggling to avoid the fact that the doctor was guilty of battery. The court's objection to battery-based actions concerning risk disclosure, that is, the plaintiff does not need to prove the causation. This is a difficult evidential burden for the plaintiff to prove. In Chatterton, Bristow stated, where the claim is based on negligence, the plaintiff must prove not only the breach of duty to inform, but that the duty had not been broken. She would not have chosen to have the operation. Distinction by type of undisclosed medical advice. In the Canadian case of Kelly versus Hazlitt, 1976, Morden J. stated, what's with the J's? The issue of informed consent can arise in both battery and negligence cases. With respect to the former, a lack of proper information communicated by the doctor to the patient can vitiate apparent consent. while with respect to the latter, failure to see it that the patient is properly advised can amount in certain circumstances to an act of negligence. Vitiate, V-I-T-I-A-T-E, vitiate apparent consent. New word, everybody, new word. Feng believes that the House of Lords in Sidaway versus Board of Governors of the Bethlehem Royal Hospital and the Maudsley Hospital, 1985, has incorporated the doctrine of informed consent into the English tort of negligence, but in a reduced form and not in the same terms, and thus expanding the liability of doctors. He argues that doctors must not only examine, diagnose, and treat a patient competently, they must now advise the patient properly. Lords Bridge and Keith showed they were willing to override accepted medical practice where the disclosure of particular information is so obviously necessary, even to a non-expert, to enable the patient to make a considered decision on the treatment. The kind of case I have in mind would be an operation involving a substantial risk of grave adverse consequences, as for example, the 10% risk of a stroke from the operation, which has a subject of the Canadian case of Rebill versus Hughes. In such a case, the absence of some cognate clinical reason why the patient should not be informed, a doctor recognising and respecting his patient's right of decision could hardly fail to appreciate the necessity for an appropriate warning. However, it is suggested that this situation would probably give rise to an action in trespass. Actions in, all right? Actors act, action in trespass. This is at the legal level. This is all at public legislative law level, or at least cause some overlap with the consent element. The English courts faced with this problem have tried to deal with the overlap by distinguishing between medical trespass and negligence. Hurst J. Held in Hills versus Potter, 1983. 1983, in the place to be. I am Jack Master J. This is Run DMC. Sorry, wow, programming 1983, in the place to be. Run DMC. Sorry, it's just that's it. It's how it works with Indigos. See, programming, synaptic firing off, whoop, random tangent. It's how we roll. That's how you get places. Call me fragmented and crazy, but this is how the brain works and what programming is put in where. And it's just, some call it thought, some call it download, some call it crazy, some call it discovery. Right, Hurst J. Held in Hills versus Potter, 1983. As to the claim for assault and battery, the plaintiff's undoubted consent to the operation, which was performed, negatives on any possibility of liability under this head. I should add that I respectfully agree with Bristow J. in deploring reliance on these torts in medical cases of this kind. The proper cause of action, if any, is negligence. Lord Donaldson, M.R., in the Court of Appeal, said in Freeman, oh wow, apparent, versus Home Office. No way, 1983. Freeman versus Home Office, 1983. Subject to the patient having been informed in broad terms the nature of the treatment, consent in fact amounts to consent in law. The Court of Appeal in Sidaway excluded the doctrine of informed consent in England. In its original form, the doctrine applied to medical trespass, and as such, for the defence to operate, there must be full disclosure before a patient's informed consent to treatment was obtained, Brown Wilkinson said. Cases of this sort can be approached in two different ways. First, it can be said that the operation constituted a trespass to the person of the patient, since, oh my goodness, constituted a trespass to the person of the patient. Interesting terminology and verbiage, isn't it? Remember, this is legal public law, not in equity, not in personam, not going through the private avenue. This is all public statutory, legislative law. So first, it can be said that the operation constituted a trespass to the person of the patient. Yes, key words. Since in the absence of full knowledge of the risks, the patient has not validly consented to the operation. Secondly, it can be said that although there was a valid consent to the operation, the doctor was in breach of a duty of care in failing to give sufficient information of the risks to the plaintiff. Now that would be patient, and that would be a person of the patient, but now they're saying plaintiff because in the judicial realm, it's the one that has got the issue and bringing the claim to the court. In my judgment, clear that the genesis of the transatlantic doctrine of informed consent lies in the first of these approaches. It is, in my judgment, clear that the genesis of the transatlantic doctrine of informed consent lies in the first of these approaches. Wow, that's a sentence and a half. Sorry, just how it is. This is Brown Wilkinson, not me. The Court of Appeal held that consent in medical trespass, just as the position of consent in criminal law, is only vitiated when the failure to explain relates to the nature of treatment and not when the failure pertains to risk inherent in the treatment, which is presumably a collateral matter. Lord Donaldson, Mr. held. Let's get my Lord voice on. I am wholly satisfied that as a matter of English law, a consent is not vitiated by a failure on the part of the doctor to give the patient sufficient information before the consent is given. It is only if the consent is obtained by fraud or misrepresentation of the nature of what is to be done that it can be said that an apparent consent is not a true consent. That is the position of the criminal law. And as the cause of action based on trespass to the person is closely analogous. Surely, if the plaintiff does not consent to the nature of the treatment, the consent is not real anyway, and the method of vitiation is surely irrelevant. The Sidaway case is illustrative of the court's endeavour to exclude the doctrine from English law. If one applies the master of the rolls discussion above to the failure to disclose risks, it would make more sense. Wait. Lord Donaldson, MR, Mr. Capitals is not Mr. Lord Donaldson, MR is Lord Donaldson, Master of the Rolls. That's why I got my Lord's voice on then, instinctively, because I knew he was a very, very, very distinguished fellow. You know, wow, Master of the Rolls, rewind selector. If one applies the Master of the Rolls discussion above to the failure to disclose risks, it would make more sense. As Laskin, CJC, Charlie, Juliet, Charlie, explained in Rebill versus Hughes, 1980, in the Canadian Supreme Court. I can appreciate the temptation to say that the genuineness of consent to medical treatment depends on proper disclosure of the risks, which it entails. But in my view, unless there has been misrepresentation or fraud to secure consent to the treatment, a failure to disclose the attendant risks should go to negligence rather than battery. Laskin, CJC, continued, although such failure relates to an informed choice submitting to or refusing recommended and appropriate treatment, it arises as the breach of an anterior duty of due care. Wow. Comparable in legal obligation to the duty of due care in carrying out the particular treatment to which the patient has consented. It is not a test of the validity of the consent. The House of Lords in Sidaway did not refer to the criminal law distinction between medical trespass and negligence drawn by the Court of Appeal, but Lord Scarman did indeed say, Mrs. Sidaway consented to the operation. She signed the usual consent form in which she can declare the nature and purpose of the operation been explained to her. It would be deplorable to base the law in medical cases of this kind of torts, assault and battery. Difficulties in the distinction. It could be argued that the criminal law distinction should not be applied to tort cases. It has been suggested that the fraud in tort vitiates consent through, although the person is aware of the actual nature of the invasion. Fleming asserts an assent to bodily contact under a mistake as to its harmful or offensive character ought not to be treated as genuine consent if the mistake is known and concealed by the defendant. Thus, an action for assault ought to be available to one who permits another to touch him with a piece of metal which, unknown to him, them, but known to the actor, is heavily unknown to him, but known to the actor, is heavily charged with electricity, or to a woman who consents to intercourse with a man who inveigled her into a bigamous marriage without disclosing that he already has a wife, or to a naive girl who submits to indecent liberties by a physician in the belief that this is a necessary part of the treatment. Such mischief is best deterred by permitting recovery. Admittedly, there must be some limits in civil cases to the invalidation of consent. It is clearly irrational to allow minor fraudulent concealment to vitiate consent. The civil standard should be lower than that, the civil, not the criminal, the civil standard should be lower than that required for criminal culpability, but its ambit should extend to include fraud going to the extent of harm suffered. Harm, injury, loss, that's common law. Public, like this is where they're talking about harm, and they're talking about legislative law, and they're talking about civil, and they're talking about tort, and they're talking about public. Nobody's gone private, nobody's gone in persona. Different ways to tackle this. So this is just one of the ways that they currently go is default. It is the context of the medical advice concealed that this is material and not the mode of concealment. To deny the patient adequate information prevents the full consideration of the treatment they are to receive, and any consent given is then therefore invalid. Therefore, liability in medical trespass would be wider than the analogous position in criminal law. Serious risk can be part of the nature of the treatment and therefore are not collateral matters. Simply negligent advice can also go to the nature of the treatment and therefore is not necessarily confined to inherent risks. The distinction in the criminal law between the nature of the act and other collateral matters is not the same for deciding the existence of consent. So even if the criminal law analogy is correct, the distinctions between medical trespass and negligence are not. According to the Court of Appeal in Sidaway, the risk must be so great and the benefit so small that it affects the very nature of the treatment, the concealment of which defeats consent and gives rise to medical trespass. Accordingly, the nature of treatment and the inherent risk can sometimes be so intertwined, it is not possible to separate them. Morden, J. in Kelly versus Hazlitt, 1976, drew the distinction between medical trespass and negligence based on type of medical information not communicated. He admitted that the distinction was difficult. However, it has to be recognized that this test has both its practical and perhaps its policy frailties. In some cases, it may be difficult to distinguish and separate out the matter of consequential or collateral risks from the basic nature and character of the operation or the procedure to be performed. The more probable the risk, the more it could be said to be an integral feature of the nature, character of the operation. Nature and risks can indeed be interchangeable, therefore it is highly confusing to use them as a basis for any distinction. The division of medical trespass and negligence cannot be based on the type of medical advice not communicated. Such a distinction is at best an oversimplification and misleading. Because medical advice is not limited to the nature of treatment and inherent risks, in reality, it is not sufficiently demarcated into two separate components to provide a basis for the distinction. Usually, it will contain a mixture of these two aspects and may also include advice on the risks of foregoing treatment. Alternative methods of treatment, benefits and consequences, including prospects of success of the contemplated treatment. The contents and the mix may vary from case to case. Bristow J. in Chatterton. In my own judgment, what the court has to do in each case is to look at all the circumstances and say, was there a real consent? It's going on for a while. I'm very tired. We're nearly at 2 pages and we're at chapter 3, and I'll stop. Distinction by decree of medical advice uncommunicated. Superficially, it seems that if the risk is high, this vitiates consent, giving rise to trespass. However, if the risk is lower, consent may not be invalidated, but it may give rise to negligence. The distinction between trespass and negligence is therefore a matter of the numerical percentage in the risk. A comparative evaluation of numerical percentage of riskiness necessary for trespass and negligence is not simple. It's not easy to say. Other relevant factors may include the state of the patient, their fears and desires, the seriousness of their ailment, the urgency of treatment, the benefits from treatment, the facilities and skills available to all to have to be considered apart from the risks inherent in the treatment. The majority of law lords in Sidaway rejected the doctrine of informed consent as styled in America and Canada to advance the reasonable patient standard in medical negligence. Lords Bridge, Keith and Diplock held the profession, it is said, Judge voice. The profession, it is said, should not be judged in its own case or less emotively, but more correctly. The courts should not allow medical opinion as to what is best for the patient to override the patient's right to decide for himself whether he will submit to the treatment offered to him. If the Bolam principle is to be applied to the exclusion of any other test to advice and warning, there will be cases in which patient who suffers injury through ignorance of a risk known to the doctor has no remedy. If it be recognised that a doctor's duty of care extends not only to the health and well-being of his patient, but also to a proper respect for his patient's right to the duty to warn and can be seen to be part of the doctor's duty of care. Lord Bridge, a decision of what degree of disclosure of risks is best calculated to assist a particular patient to make a rational choice whether or not to undergo a particular treatment must primarily be a matter of clinical judgment. It would follow from this that the issue whether non-disclosure in a particular case should be condemned as a breach of the doctor's duty of care. It is an issue to be decided primarily on the basis of expert medical evidence applying the Bolam test. Lord Diplock held this general duty is not subject to the dissection into a number of component parts to which different criteria of what satisfy the duty of care apply, such as diagnosis, treatment and advice. The Bolam case itself embraced failure to advise the patient of the risk involved in the ECT treatment as one of the allegations of negligence against the surgeon, as well as negligence in the actual carrying out of the treatment in which that risk did result in injury to the patient. The same criteria applied to both these aspects of the surgeon's duty of care. In modern medicine and surgery, such dissection of the various things a doctor has to do in the exercise of his whole duty of care owned to his patient is neither legally meaningful or medically practicable. Lord Templeman's opinion was a compromise between the reasonable doctor and the reasonable patient test. He held a doctor is under a duty to inform to the extent of balancing the provision of sufficient information to enable a patient to make a rational judgment with the protection the patient's interest by not frightening or confusing them. The test for sufficiency of knowledge for consent in medical trespass is that of the reasonable patient test as opposed to the reasonable doctor test in medical negligence. because trespass is concerned with protecting the patient's integrity. Medical negligence generally is concerned with the standard of professional conduct, whereas the duty to disclose the information imposes upon the domain of the patient and therefore should be judged from the viewpoint of the patient. A greater failure of medical advice must be established for an action to lie in trespass, but should this be restricted to the nature of the treatment? Whichever of the two civil actions is the most appropriate, the patient's right to self-determination should be afforded greater protection than is presently provided. And then that goes on to chapter 3. We've got the line there. We'll close that up. Wow. That's what we do when we research and we're looking at substance over form, historical content. That's research done by my mum for that dissertation. What you can see there is a civil legal position, claim, how they deal with that, how it's dealt with. That's, where are we? Who have we got in the house who's dropped in since we started chatting? Let me just refresh. Who am I on? There's the camera, forgetting where we are. Live chat. We're on. Right then, so you turn the camera off. I'm going to have a wander around and we'll carry on. I'll take your comments and then we'll wrap it up. So we'll keep this one short and sweet, if that's possible. If you have got any medical negligence, personal injury issues, worries, concerns, past family members going in for an advised procedure and coming out with something different happening. There was a reference there of operations on the wrong patient, and there was a reference in the terrestrial newscast recently of a male having the wrong testicle removed. So therefore, if you've got one bad gonad, we'll call it testicle, and you're going for an operation and they remove the good one, that then renders you what? Yeah, seedless. So quite a blunder, medical mistake, negligence, personal injury happening a lot. So what you didn't see and what the universities don't encapsulate is that when man is harmed, all right, this is the they call it the person, and we know about the persona, the personam, equity, acting personam, common law is done by man to man. So when we argue the common law, we argued it and we got mixed up. So we found the merger of the common law and equity within the CPR. That's what's posted. The first link, the 2019 version is about £600. I don't presently own a copy of this myself. I need one. The trust needs one. We want to build up a library and we want to house these publications in our local headquarters, wherever that may be in the future, and have an access point for consultations, library, archiving, referencing, watching videos, seminars, all of it. And this is very key, important information, because if you don't know to bring claims in private to the man, from the man, then you'll go public and you'll go at law, legislative law, civil. Now, some of it will border on criminal. Now, whether you can prove that, the word causation was mentioned there, and causation is how they put out, he who makes the claim must provide the burden of proof. So if you're telling me that Dr. X took off the wrong testicle, and you can prove that, and this is what we do, going down the paperwork and all of the claims and everything like that, and then we work out how the remedy can be attained. Now, if there is an at law public legislative remedy there, it will just generally involve the doctor getting I don't know, I'm speaking generally, don't quote me, this is not factual accurate, I'm assuming the doctor will get some kind of a strikeout. We're aware of doctors operating on NHS with claims against them and payouts, so I can't say any names now, but you will find them, and therefore they're continuing to practice, but they've had malpractice suits brought against them and they're still practicing. So that tells me what? That the legal civil justice system is not dealing with the issues at hand, because if you had a faulty automobile And there was a guy there building on the production line, and he kept missing off the odd bolts because he just couldn't be bothered. He kept going for fag breaks. Then he's committing liability. And every time he goes off for a fag break and misses them bolts off the steering rack, breaking, whatever system, and these vehicles, then automobiles, have an accident, he's directly liable for that. He wouldn't be then kept by the car insurance manufacturing company after being found to be away from his station during prescribed working times of contractual obligation, and he would be held liable for the subsequent damage, harm and loss caused by his negligent actions of being at work and having a fag break, not putting the bolts on. So by the same effect, if you have a private corporation operating out there under an element of trust in the public realm, using private funding, charging bonds, certificate, insurance, identities, and it's all a facade, then this doctor that has medical malpractice lawsuits brought against him and held and settled out of court, yes, that's the key part there, settled out of court rather than holding them to account. Some are brought to court, they're not all settled out of court, but yet they continue to practice. Are they paid less? Did they take a pay cut? What's happening here? So it's very confusing. I know it is to you with the areas that we come through. Trying to keep it brief and to the point, but we need to look at the next stages and how to tackle this. And when you are looking at the realm, there is a lot of this stuff going off, and we're quite scared by it. It's quite worrying. So a lot of that is applicable that I've read out across the board, battery and certain bits. They're all not maxims as such, but they are unilaterally universal governances of. So there was a lot of citations, America, Canada, England, Lords, so forth and so on. So this is just part of the research that we do when we're looking at the civil and practice rules and procedure, claims, liability, public, private, damages, and how it works. And we need to analyze the system and know the system in order to work with the system. It's not our system, and there's a system there for us. That was the merger of the equitable remedies in the CPR sections that were there in plain sight that nobody found. Okay, and no other. You can find me a YouTube video where they're telling you that, where they're telling you about the merger of the Part 7, Part 8 claims. I'm not going to say it all and get it wrong because, that's what I do. I copy and I get it wrong. No, it's just a lot of information to get out there off the top of your bonds articulately, and concisely, whilst holding down servitude 40 hours and other such things. So we can do a lot, but we can't do it all. It's a family effort. And it involves you using your due diligence, discovery, and a lot of research, reading, note making, dictionaries, word searching, and it will come to you. Those that have the eyes and the ears, they will get it, and it will be wisdom. Those that don't, it will just be words and confuse you. So that's what I'm doing here today, a special little cast in honour of all those that submit research into the public realm, like the hangout yesterday with Brother Josh, Costa, myself, Sister Karen and Patricia, you scribes in form there. Excellent, truly magical. Nimble horse, scriber, things that come out of those little quotations, truly magical. The discussions that we have and the movement that we make is what we will make of it. And if we don't put ourselves out there and exercise our rights to act, our rights to execute deeds, our rights to be duly informed. You have this right. We are not informed of it. And we are tired of seeing our brethren, family, loved ones on all land masses across all of the realm being taken to the cleaners and not having their rights upheld. And because you don't know of your rights and you are acting in the public, this is where the error and the omissions and the injustices and the miscarriages of justices are legally carried out, but lawfully they are heinous to man and persons and patients and men, and you see how it's all enwrapped here. So it's harm on the body, it's harm on the tribe part, yes, the mind, body and soul. Your life is physically affected going forward. You are on less abled, handicapped type ability, you might not be able to reproduce anymore due to having the wrong testicle removed. So, you know, this is not really public legislative law that we'd need to argue here. If man cannot reproduce again, yeah, would you say that was legal, or would you say that was a lawful issue? Would you say that a fine and some pennies would make it right? Or would you say an eye for an eye, a bollock for a bollock? Hey, I'm telling you. So, yeah, what's good for a goose is good for a gander. And they're not one rule for one and one rule for the other. You know, here we go. Now you're seeing it, aren't you? So this is where the power lies, and the power lies with reservation of the rights and understanding and seeing the systems and the way that it's layered. And then obviously the status, standing, capacity, positions. I'd like to see what Brother Smithy's got to say on certain parts of this. You know, we all do read books, and we've got lots of them. We're not just YouTube copiers. We don't copy and paste. We can recite most of it from the heart. Next week, we will introduce ourselves to a great many new faces, and that being the Llangollen event there. And you know, we're excited to say the least. We will bring you more when we've got more. You've seen how it's happened. I am an honorary guest, not an honorary guest, sorry, but yeah, been invited. Smithy is the honorary guest. I'm going to go and back up this brother. He's made the splashdown in the USA, America, and the family there are booking tickets from Canada, America, worldwide to come and say hello, shake hands and see him, because when he's on Able Danger live stream with Field and Gobsmack, you see Field on the camera. So yeah, they want an interaction in persona, the energy, the vibe. It's very exciting. It's very real. It is real. And yeah, we're going to represent the movement, the Anglo family in a private capacity. And yes, we will report back and keep you all duly informed. This situation that we have at hand must be dealt with. We do need an institution. No, we don't. Not an institution. We need a reference point, a validated point of contact for this outlay, self-governing, lawful men of the realm under the Creator. The greatest story never told. It was uploaded yesterday by me. Look at the newest videos that I'm sharing from the archive collection of many years ago, when these are the type of videos I first got into. Jordan Maxwell, Santos Bonacci, Brother Matthew Sheffield giving me Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Yourself Rich, Alan Watts, and the videos that are going out now, some very old Jordan Maxwell, Zachariah Sitchin's private interviews, dark occultism. This isn't us bringing it. It's just how it works, dressed in black, black nobility, the color black, Black's law. Okay, this is how it is. This is we don't agree with it, but we're bringing it to you and we're laying it out. So thank you to my mum for that publication. She did say at Christmas when she was round and she made an appearance on Sun and Moon and said hello, that I must reference that and use it. It's got a lot of stuff in it. I have consent and authority to use that publication. It's a private one. I've copied it from my mum. Everyone, is that allowed? Is that okay? I do copy. I tell you that. I get called a copier, but we all copy. You copy me. You copy Andy. You copy other tube channels, scribes. That's what we do. Man emulates. And when somebody copies, I am humbled and honored. I don't start saying, oh, that's my intellectual copyright, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to take you to the cleaners. Have you done for? But yeah, defamation, slander, and such things as bad character references, then yeah, we might have a problem. But if you take something and you are enriched by it, you are empowered by it, you are having a better, secure, stable life, you have changed from public to private, and you have got remedy in the correct area that you want, that is suited to you, and you have had justice done. I'm speaking at ease here for everybody in broad terms, then life is much better. We stop submitting and we stop begging and we stop pleading and making declarations of, oh, I'm disabled, I'm going to tell you, I'm declaring it, and then get held and be made accountable for your declarations of how they played the game. So we would now start to wish and require of folk, and when they can't do that, we would ask them why, and we would take it in a private capacity using the public instrumentation. I'm going to go to your comments, and then we're going to end. Okay. What? John, thank you. Before I even look, just put that back in. John, I like it. It's too small. This text on the screen is too small. I can't read. I'm struggling to see all my eyesight's going. Chillstar, Shadow, Michael, thank you. Bernice, so close to your heart. They tried to kill my dad off with end-of-life drugs. Bernice, I'm sorry, sister. My condolences. It's close to a lot of man's hearts, this. Thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. But thank you, yes, for your comment, and much love to you and the family. Shivite, Shivaboom Om, all is at Om. Yes, it is, my brother. Much love to you. We are holding them, but my vehicle has a leak, but hopefully most will be live. That's right. Yeah, we'll get it from Gobsmack, some kind of 4K. Hey, yeah, if it isn't, after all this chat and hype, I will be amazed. Positive intentions, yes, sister, that's what we've got. The law, hermeticism and hermetic principles, Hegelian dialect. There is a law system out there that's been hidden. We discussed some of that last night on the hangout on Sun and Moon. I've uploaded that to the channel with some new videos this morning. So yeah, I'm going to go back to emails, messages. I spoke to brother Sovereign Smith. I need to touch base with G-Star, Michael. Later on, a few little jobs here and there. So all is well. It's a bit grey and gloomy, but the sun shines in our hearts. Positivity, positive mental attitude, having a great mantra. And yeah, thank you for viewing the Prudent Patient and the Bolam test, eh? That came out of nowhere. Thank you very much. Peace, love, and light. Share this video, download it, whatever you need to do. Thumbs up it. If you haven't subscribed, please give me a subscription there. My Patreon is getting looked at in the next week as well. Next week, I'm off for the full week as well. I envisage 48 hours at Llanglochlan, roughly. I'm speaking for myself here, not for Smithy. We're going to go down together. Starts on the 19th. So we should be, going down on the 19th. We're going to see what's happening. You know, I'm going to speak for myself here. I'm not authorised to speak for Smithy, but we are going to be going down on the 19th in is one together. I'll take some T-shirts, hoodie, silver water, lots of love, ourselves, some suits and shoes. Yeah, you will see us in formal attire here. We'll make the effort like what we did when we went down to Alderhay. We'll be suited and booted. And I'm looking very, very forward to this energetic, interactive hustle and bustle of international family, national, bloodlines here. We're all family, regardless of creed, sex, race, colour, age, gender, ability. Yes, we are one. We are the tribes, the 12. And it's going to be fast and fun. I'll be making videos when I've got permission and allowed. I'll take memory cards. I'll take some photos. We will do private updates, myself and Smithy, either through his channel, my channel. We'll take laptops and all the various equipment. We will be prepared as always, and we will keep you duly informed and updated. Big love to the Americans that have come over to the channel, to the new subscribers. Big love to those that are thumbs up in sharing and doing the do. Thank you for the defence yesterday. I did see in the comments on Sun and Moon, he likes the sound of his own voice. I forget the YouTube subscriber. I'm not going to get personal. The heat is on for myself and Smithy. So those of you that are in the Blue Man group, extra big love and thanks for your support. Continue due diligence within the chats that we host and that we have. I've said thank you for my 3,000 subscribers. Smithy's going to start doing some casts and publications of his own via his channel, Eye of Creator. We're going to get busy in the next couple of weeks. You're going to see a lot more influx and activity. The family continues to develop. We are going to appoint the agents very soon. I'm looking at my emails now. I'm working. I've got another 200 built up from David at splspro.com. There's UK Freedom and Contact at Sovereign and a few other accounts I need to look at, but I'm utilising and prioritising David at splspro.com. I am working through it. I'm giving myself extra time to get through, so bear with us. There is just 5 of us running this .com at the moment. Andy's doing his thing. Kev's got his thing going off. They're private men, but they contribute and sacrifice for the greater good. So for that, we give immense love, immense thanks. I bless Andrew, Kevin, Andy Sovereign Smith. Sorry, getting all formal. Kevin, Greg, Josh, all of the associated families with them, 4 brothers and myself, maybe number 5, all of the scribes. Thank you, gods, stars, angels, Mum for the work. All of it happens for a reason. Everything is put into place for a reason. I shouldn't be here. You know that. But we are here. We answer our calling. My calling is David. And, I have a name. I am not a name. I use a name. To use a legal name is legal fraud. No, it isn't. To annex yourself and to call yourself the legal name and to agree to be that legal name and to claim that legal name and to answer with a date of birth and a national insurance number is kind of fraud and illegal. But to use a legal name such as Mr. David Smith is not illegal. That's your instrumentation. We'd like you to consider implementing those billboards that went up some years ago. To use a legal name is legal fraud. Well, I'd argue with that now. To use a legal name is actually correct. Yes. I just wanted to express that, to use these legal names, that's what we do. We use them. We do not claim them and we do not agree to be them, you see. So again, we're further cementing how we are. I'm sorry for anybody that's had medical negligence, or if this video and subsequent information and, outlining is upset you or brought any memories back. But we have ones that are in dire need right now, disabled, less abled, mentally incapacitated, and they're in the public realm, they're unprotected, they've got no guardianship, they've got nobody to look after them, no trustees, the property assets, wills, interstate, probate, all of these things happening. It is a mess, and we're here to help structure, govern, nurture, and guide. No legal advice. We might look at the lawful side of it and the Mackenzie and the representation in the judicial realms. There's a lot of things in the mix. We know there's a lot that need help. We are just 5 men, primarily myself and Smithy, the front man now with Kevin and Josh. So we've got 4 G-stars holding down the tech side. Let's increase, let's expand, let's discuss, let's share the love and let's trust. All right. Peace and love. Thank you all. Bernice, loving the hearts, free woman. Love and light. Sorry I missed the live. Loving your work. Oh, thank you. Free woman. Jordan Maxwell. I have the dictionary. What it was. I'm going to come and see you one day, John. We're going to have a drink. I think me, you, and Smithy do need to meet. There are a few scribes here. Land. We might have some land to rent. Anybody wanting a conference and a meetup? We're looking at some possibly near Wales. Nothing to do with the event next week, but to do with Josh X. So Josh, if you watch this, we will chat soon, like we did yesterday, day before, about a seminar, a field, private event, get together and meet up. So Anglo, England, Wales, Mass, Ireland, Scotland, bear that in mind. We'll let you know in due course. Peace, love and light. Have an excellent Wednesday. And thank you all. Much love. Ciao, bello.